Nothing exposes weakness faster than standing strong without asking permission. Chosen ones, listen closely. If your very existence seems to irritate certain people, if your calm feels like an insult, if your progress makes others restless, defensive, or outright hostile, then let me tell you something plainly. This is not accidental, and it is not a flaw. This is the price of operating at a level they never prepared themselves to reach. Mediocrity does not hate noise. It hates contrast. And you, simply by being who you are contrast incarnate. Here's the truth most people are too uncomfortable to admit. When you move through life grounded, focused, and unapologetically yourself, you don't just succeed quietly. You disrupt internal systems. You shake belief structures. You expose ceilings others pretended were the sky. And that doesn't just make people uncomfortable. It makes them angry. Not because you attacked them, but because you refuse to shrink for them. You might be wondering, why me? Why does my silence provoke them? Why does my peace feel like a challenge? My dear chosen ones, it's because you represent what happens when excuses stop working. You are walking evidence that discipline beats drama, that clarity outperforms chaos, and that alignment doesn't need applause. And for people who survive by comparison, control, or validation, that kind of presence feels like an existential threat. Think of it like this. A cracked mirror hates a clean reflection. Not because the reflection is loud, but because it's honest. You don't need to insult them. You don't need to compete. You don't even need to acknowledge them. Your consistency does the damage for you. Every day you keep moving forward without bitterness, without theatrics, without begging for recognition. You send a message they can't mute. This is possible. And for someone who built their identity around why it can't be done, that message feels like an attack. Here's another question you might be asking yourself. If I'm not bothering anyone, why do they keep reacting? Because chosen ones don't need permission to rise. You don't wait for consensus. You don't outsource your confidence. You don't need the room to clap before you take the step. And that independence destabilizes people who rely on social approval as oxygen. They were taught that power comes from being liked, feared, or obeyed. You prove that power comes from being rooted. Chosen ones, before we go any further, take a moment to support this movement. If these words resonate with you, if they energize you, challenge you, or remind you of who you are becoming, show that alignment by hitting the like button. It helps this message reach others who need it just as much as you once did. And make sure you subscribe to the channel so we can continue putting in the work to bring you powerful, inspiring, and life-changing content that fuels your growth. Your support keeps this energy alive, this space active, and this mission moving forward. There's a quote that says, "The tree that bears fruit gets the most stones." Not because it's doing something wrong, but because it's doing something visible. You are that tree. And while they are busy throwing, you're busy growing. That's the part they can't stand. You're not distracted by their noise. You're not slowed by their resentment. You're not negotiating your worth. You are moving, building, becoming. And all they can do is react. Let's be very clear about something. Chosen ones. Their anger is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that you're on the right frequency. People who are aligned don't get triggered by someone else's progress. Only those who feel left behind do. Only those who settled, compromised, or abandoned their own potential feel that burning need to tear down what they don't have the courage to build. And here's the part that should fuel you. Every attempt to undermine you is proof that your presence has weight. Empty lives don't provoke strong reactions. Unremarkable paths don't attract resistance. If they're watching, whispering, projecting, or plotting, it's because on some level they recognize your momentum. They feel the shift. They sense that you're not here to orbit their approval. You are here to move forward, whether they understand it or not. You may feel isolated at times. You may wonder why growth feels lonely. That's because chosen ones don't travel in crowds. You travel in clarity. And clarity is threatening to people who prefer confusion because confusion gives them cover. Your awareness removes that cover. Your self-respect removes leverage. Your calm removes control. That combination is devastating to anyone who survives on manipulation or hierarchy. So when the looks change, when the tone shifts, when support turns into silence or hostility, don't internalize it. Interpret it correctly. This is resistance, not rejection. This is confirmation, not condemnation. You are not here to be palatable. You are here to be precise. You are not here to be liked. You are here to be aligned. Chosen ones, let their anger sharpen you, not soften you. Let their discomfort remind you why you chose growth over comfort in the first place. You are not too much. You are not arrogant. You are not wrong for standing tall. You are simply operating at a level that exposes everything they hoped would stay hidden, and that, whether they admit it or not, is power. Chosen ones, pause right here for a second. If this message feels like it's speaking directly to you, if it's naming experiences you couldn't explain but always felt, then this channel is meant to be part of your journey. Support this work by liking the video and subscribing, not out of obligation, but alignment. Drop a comment below with 77 if you recognize yourself in this path and you're ready to keep rising despite the resistance. Your engagement keeps this space alive and allows us to keep delivering sharp, energizing, and perspective-shifting content. And now, let's move forward, step by step, because if you truly are a chosen one, what comes next will feel uncomfortably familiar. Number 1. Your presence shatters the stories they tell themselves. You become the mirror they've been avoiding. Nothing angers a lie more than standing in front of the truth. My dear chosen ones, understand this clearly from the very beginning. You don't make your haters mad because you speak loudly, dominate rooms, or try to prove anything. You make them mad because you exist as a living contradiction to the stories they've been telling themselves for years. Your presence alone dismantles their comfort. Your life quietly questions their excuses. And that kind of pressure doesn't require confrontation, explanation, or effort. It happens automatically. Here's what's really going on beneath the surface. Many people survive by self-deception. They build mental fortresses around their insecurities, convincing themselves they are fine, that they've done enough, that circumstances were unfair, that effort wasn't worth it, that potential can wait. These stories aren't truth. They're anesthesia, and anesthesia works only until someone awake walks into the room. That's where you come in, chosen ones. When you move through life with discipline, clarity, and quiet confidence, you disrupt their internal balance. You don't argue with their beliefs. You don't challenge them directly. You simply live differently, and that difference is unbearable to someone who has settled. It's like turning on a light in a room where everyone agreed to sit in the dark and call it comfort. Suddenly, nothing feels safe anymore. You might wonder, why do they react so strongly when I've done nothing to them? Because your consistency exposes inconsistency. Your growth highlights stagnation. Your accountability makes their avoidance visible. You are not attacking them, but their ego experiences you as a threat because you represent proof. Proof that discipline works. Proof that growth is possible. Proof that excuses are optional. And for someone whose identity is built on avoidance, that proof feels violent. Think of it like this. A person who pretends they're healthy will resent the presence of someone who trains every day. Not because the athlete said anything, but because the athlete's body tells the truth without words. You are that kind of presence. Your habits, your boundaries, your refusal to indulge in chaos all speak louder than confrontation ever could. You don't need to criticize their choices. Your life already does. Chosen ones, this is why their anger feels irrational. It is. It doesn't come from logic. It comes from instinct. The human mind is wired to protect its identity at all costs. When someone shows up living beyond the limits they accepted, their psyche interprets it as danger. Not physical danger, but identity danger. If your life is possible, then their story collapses, and collapse is terrifying to anyone who built comfort on denial. Notice how often they project. They'll call you arrogant for having standards, cold for having boundaries, lucky for having results, difficult for not playing along. These labels are defenses. They're attempts to reduce the discomfort you create by existing fully. It's easier to insult the mirror than to clean your face. And my dear chosen ones, you are the mirror they keep trying to crack. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to soften your growth. You don't have to apologize for becoming more than what was expected of you. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. In fact, it's your confirmation. Every time your calm triggers chaos, every time your silence triggers gossip, every time your progress triggers resentment, it's evidence that you are touching a nerve they hoped would stay numb. Ask yourself this: if you were truly insignificant, would they react this strongly? If your path didn't challenge something inside them, would they be this invested in your movement? The answer is obvious. Indifference is reserved for the irrelevant. Resistance is reserved for impact. Chosen ones, understand the power in this. You are not here to convince anyone. You are here to embody what happens when excuses lose power. Your life is the receipt. Your consistency is the argument. Your peace is the verdict. And no matter how much they twist narratives or manipulate perception, reality keeps siding with you because reality doesn't negotiate. So when you feel the tension shift in a room, when conversations change after you leave, when people become passive-aggressive, competitive, or dismissive, don't internalize it. Interpret it correctly. You've activated the mirror. You've reminded them of what they postponed, avoided, or abandoned. And that reminder hurts more than any insult you could ever deliver. Chosen ones, let this fuel you. Not with arrogance, but with precision. Not with anger, but with momentum. You are not responsible for protecting other people from the truth your life represents. Keep moving, keep building, keep aligning. Because the more authentic you become, the clearer it gets. Their anger is not about you at all. It's about the version of themselves they can no longer ignore when you walk by. Number 2, you survived what they were certain would break you. You refused to shatter on schedule. They planned your collapse like an appointment. You missed it, and that changed everything. My dear chosen ones, this is one of the deepest reasons your haters stay angry long after the situation should have ended. Long before you realized what was happening, some people were already running projections on you. They studied your background, your struggles, your setbacks, your moments of doubt. They decided where you would fail. They assumed the exact pressure point where you'd finally give in, give up, or give way. In their minds, your breaking point wasn't a possibility, it was a certainty. And you were supposed to arrive there right on time, but you didn't. That's what broke them. There are people who believe life is a game of leverage. They think if they apply enough pressure, enough doubt, enough fear, they can bend anyone. They see resilience as temporary and strength as performative. So they wait, they poke, they test, they escalate. They tell themselves, just a little more and they'll crack. But with every wave you survived, with every season you endured, something unexpected happened. You stayed standing. Chosen ones, you need to understand how destabilizing this is to people who rely on prediction and control. They had a blueprint for your failure, a mental script where you were supposed to fall apart exactly when the weight became unbearable. They expected exhaustion to turn into surrender, pain to turn into bitterness, pressure to turn into obedience. Instead, you adapted. You adjusted, you learned, and you kept moving. That wasn't part of their plan. They weren't prepared for someone who could be pushed and not break, bent and not snap, challenged and not retreat. Every time you walked away intact, it exposed something they didn't want to see. Their influence had limits, and nothing enrages a controlling mind more than realizing their reach ends before your spirit does. You might ask yourself, why does it still bother them? Why do they keep bringing up the past, the struggle, the moments I should have fallen? Because they invested emotionally in your collapse. They needed it to happen to validate their worldview. Your failure was supposed to confirm that resilience has an expiration date, that pressure always wins, that people eventually submit. When you didn't, their certainty turned into confusion. Confusion turned into fear, and fear turned into anger. Think about it this way. If someone bets everything on the idea that storms destroy structures and then watches you walk out of a hurricane stronger, they don't celebrate your survival. They question their entire belief system. You are that contradiction. You are the variable that ruined their calculations. The equation no longer balances because you didn't follow the rules they assumed governed everyone. Chosen ones, this is why their reactions feel extreme, delayed, or disproportionate. They're not responding to the present. They're reacting to the past that didn't go according to plan. They replay moments where you were supposed to break and can't reconcile the fact that you didn't. Every unshaken step you take now reminds them that they lost control long ago. And make no mistake, control is currency to them. It's how they measure worth, power, and relevance. When control fails, their identity feels threatened. They don't just lose influence over you. They lose confidence in their understanding of how the world works. And instead of questioning themselves, they direct that discomfort toward you. You didn't survive quietly either. You grew. You sharpened. You became more aware, more grounded, more self-directed. You started seeing through narratives they hoped would confuse you. You stopped reacting the way they expected. You stopped playing the role they assigned. And that evolution hit harder than any confrontation ever could. By refusing to break, you sent an unspoken message. My life does not belong to your expectations. My timing is not yours. My limits are not yours. My endurance is not yours to define. And for people who assumed ownership over your outcome, that message is infuriating. Chosen ones, understand this clearly. Your resilience wasn't accidental. It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was choice layered on choice. Moment after moment where you decided not to fold, not to disappear, not to let pain rewrite your identity. And every one of those choices stripped power away from people who thought they held it. So if they're still angry, still watching, still trying to provoke a reaction, take it as confirmation. You outlived their expectations. You outgrew their blueprint. You survived a version of reality where you were supposed to fail. And nothing makes a hater madder than realizing the story they told about you never came true, because you refused to break when everything said you should have. Number 3, you operate from a core they can't access or influence. You answer to yourself, and that breaks their grip. Nothing terrifies a controller more than someone who doesn't need permission. Chosen ones, this is where their frustration turns into panic, not irritation, not jealousy, panic. Because the moment they realize you cannot be controlled, influenced, or steered, their entire strategy collapses. Most people live by external signals: approval, fear, pressure, incentives. They adjust themselves based on rewards and consequences handed out by others. That's how they survive. And they assume everyone else does the same. That assumption is exactly why they hate you. You move differently. Your decisions don't come from threats or praise. Your emotions don't rise and fall based on who's watching. Your direction isn't dictated by trends, rules, or expectations. You operate from an internal command center they cannot access. And the moment they notice that nothing they say or do moves you, they feel exposed. Here's the uncomfortable truth. People who try to control others usually lack control over themselves. They manage their anxiety by managing people. They manipulate outcomes to feel safe. They coerce behavior to feel powerful. Control is their coping mechanism, so when they encounter someone whose actions come from inner authority instead of external pressure, it short-circuits their entire worldview. You might notice how they test you. They'll try flattery first, then subtle pressure, then guilt, then criticism, then escalation. They cycle through tactics the way someone bangs on a locked door, convinced the next hit will work. But you don't open, you don't react, you don't bend, and every failed attempt doesn't just frustrate them, it reveals them. Chosen ones, this is why their reactions often seem excessive. They're not responding to what you did. They're responding to what didn't work. Your calm is not passivity, it's sovereignty. Your silence is not weakness, it's self-command. And when someone realizes they have no leverage over you, they feel naked. Ask yourself this: why do people who are secure rarely try to control others? Because control is compensation, and you remove the need for compensation by being internally anchored. You don't need approval to move forward. You don't need validation to commit. You don't need consensus to decide. That independence feels like rebellion to people who rely on obedience to feel relevant. Notice how they try to define you, label you, predict you, measure you. It's not curiosity, it's an attempt to reduce you to something manageable. If they can categorize you, they can control you. But you refuse to fit the script. You change when it aligns with you, not when it benefits them. That unpredictability isn't chaos, it's autonomy. And autonomy is terrifying to anyone whose power depends on influence. Chosen ones, this is the part most people misunderstand. You're not fighting them. You're not opposing them. You're not even engaging them. You're simply operating on a frequency that doesn't respond to manipulation. That's why your resistance feels invisible. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's absolute. The more they push, the calmer you get. The more they provoke, the clearer you become. The more they escalate, the more obvious it is that their authority is performative while yours is real. They might raise their voice. You lower your reaction. They might tighten control. You loosen attachment. And in that contrast, the truth becomes undeniable. People who live by external validation cannot understand internal guidance. They think rules create order. You know alignment does. They think power comes from influence. You know it comes from self-mastery. They think control equals safety. You know clarity does. That difference is not small. It's unbridgeable. Chosen ones understand why this makes them angry. They can't threaten someone who isn't afraid. They can't bribe someone who isn't desperate. They can't shame someone who knows who they are. And they can't dominate someone who doesn't seek permission to exist fully. Your inner authority strips them of their tools. No leverage, no hooks, no buttons. And when control fails, insecurity surfaces. That's why they lash out. That's why they become irrational. That's why they try to discredit instead of influence. Because influence requires consent, and you don't give it away cheaply. Let this settle in. You are not difficult. You are not rebellious. You are not uncooperative. You are self-directed, and self-directed people cannot be owned, steered, or contained. Chosen ones, this is why you make your haters mad. Not because you're loud, but because you're unreachable. Not because you fight back, but because you don't need to. You answer to yourself. And for those who survive by controlling others, that freedom feels like an unforgivable offense. Number 4, you exist outside the ranking system they depend on. You don't play the ladder game, and that breaks their world. Power built on rank panics when it meets someone who doesn't need permission. Chosen ones, this is one of the most threatening things about you, even if you've never tried to threaten anyone. You exist outside the structures they depend on to feel important. Most people organize life like a ladder. Who's above, who's below, who has status, who gets approval, who decides what success looks like. They feel safe inside that system because it's predictable. Titles matter, labels matter, permission matters. As long as everyone agrees to the rules, the hierarchy holds. And then you show up and quietly refuse to play. You don't chase titles to feel worthy. You don't beg gatekeepers to open doors. You don't wait for validation before moving. You build, decide, and progress based on your own standards. And that alone destabilizes people who rely on hierarchy as their source of power. They don't know where to place you. They can't rank you. They can't control you through approval or threat. You're not climbing their ladder because you never agreed that it was the only way up. This is where the anger starts, not because you attacked their position, but because your existence reveals how fragile it is. When someone operates freely outside the system itself starts to look optional, and nothing terrifies people more than the idea that the structure they built their identity around might not be necessary at all. Your independence exposes the truth they don't want to face. Their authority only works on people who accept it. You might notice how they react. Subtle attempts to pull you back in, suggestions disguised as concern, rules suddenly emphasized, status flexed a little harder than usual. They want you inside the box because inside the box they know how to deal with you. Outside it, they are powerless. You are not impressed by rank. You are not intimidated by position. You are not motivated by approval. That makes their usual tools useless. Chosen ones, this is why they try to undermine you instead of outgrowing you. It's easier to discredit someone than to admit their system isn't absolute. They may belittle your path because it doesn't follow tradition. They may question your credibility because it wasn't granted by their hierarchy. They may shame your independence by calling it reckless, arrogant, or unrealistic. But underneath all of it is fear. Fear that if your way works, their way loses authority. Think about it like this. A person guarding a locked gate panics when they realize someone else walked around the wall entirely. Not because the walker broke the gate, but because the gate was never the point. You represent that realization. You prove that success, respect, and influence don't always come from climbing. Sometimes they come from alignment, skill, and self-trust. And that truth makes gatekeepers obsolete. This is why their anger feels disproportionate. You didn't challenge them directly. You didn't ask for their seat. You didn't try to take their role. You simply moved forward without acknowledging that they were supposed to matter in your journey. And for someone whose identity is built on being needed, that is devastating. You didn't reject them personally. You rejected the system that gave them relevance. Chosen ones, understand this clearly. The anger you provoke here isn't emotional, it's structural. You threaten the order they rely on to feel safe. Every boundary you set without apology, every decision you make without consulting them, every win you achieve on your own terms, weakens the illusion that hierarchy equals power. They depend on the idea that rank creates respect. You demonstrate that respect comes from competence, clarity, and self-mastery. And here's the part they hate most. You don't need to announce your independence. You live it. Quietly, consistently, without drama. And the calmer you are, the more chaotic they become, because calm independence can't be bullied, bought, or bypassed. They may try to pressure you back into the system, but it never works. because you were never part of it to begin with. So if you've felt people becoming defensive around your progress, if you've noticed subtle power plays, passive resistance, or sudden attempts to remind you how things are done, don't doubt yourself. Interpret it correctly. You are standing outside a structure that only functions when everyone agrees to stay inside, and your refusal to participate exposes its limits. Chosen ones, you don't just defy their hierarchy, you reveal its weakness, and that is exactly why your presence makes them furious. Number 5. You awaken the life they abandoned. Nothing enrages regret more than watching someone live the life you were too afraid to choose. Chosen ones, this is one of the deepest, most explosive reasons your presence makes certain people furious, and it has very little to do with envy alone. You don't just succeed, you awaken something in them that they buried years ago. When you move through life with intention, discipline, and clarity, you don't just shine, you expose the ghost of who they could have been. And that confrontation is brutal. There are people who didn't fail because they lacked ability. They failed because they stopped choosing themselves. They took the safe route, the quiet compromise, the path that required the least resistance. Over time, those small compromises stacked up into a life that feels smaller than what they once imagined. Then you appear, not perfect, not untouched by struggle, but fully engaged, fully alive, fully responsible for your direction. And suddenly, the lie they've been telling themselves collapses. You see, mediocrity survives on distraction. As long as no one nearby is living boldly, it's easy to pretend that settling is wisdom and fear is practicality. But you don't allow that illusion to survive. Every boundary you enforce, every risk you take, every moment you choose growth over comfort acts like a spotlight on everything they postponed. You don't need to announce your ambition. Your movement does that for you. Chosen ones, they aren't angry because you're better than them. They're angry because you remind them of who they were before they convince themselves to stop trying. You embody the courage they talked themselves out of, the discipline they delayed, the clarity they avoided because clarity demands responsibility. Facing you means facing the truth. The door didn't close. They walked away from it. You might ask yourself, why does my progress feel like a personal insult to them? Because your progress destroys the comfort of excuses. When someone has built their identity around, I couldn't because, and you show up doing it anyway, the excuse dies. And when excuses die, accountability is next. That's the moment anger shows up, not as logic, not as reason, but as defense. Watch closely and you'll see it. They'll minimize your achievements. They'll call it luck, timing, privilege, or obsession. They'll pretend you're extreme for being consistent, unrealistic for being ambitious, or selfish for choosing yourself. These labels aren't about you, they're armor. If they can reduce your journey, they don't have to confront their own stagnation. The truth is, chosen ones, you don't even need success to trigger this reaction. Authentic effort is enough. The willingness to take ownership is enough. The moment you stop outsourcing responsibility and start steering your life, you become a walking reminder that potential is meant to be used. And that reminder burns for people who turned their back on theirs. There's a quiet despair that lives inside people who know deep down that they settled. They may never admit it out loud, but they feel it when they see you. Your independence forces comparison. Your discipline exposes indulgence. Your purpose makes their routines feel hollow. And instead of rising to meet that discomfort, many choose resentment. It's easier to attack the mirror than to rebuild the self. Chosen ones, understand this clearly. You are not responsible for their anger. You did not create their regret. You simply refuse to inherit it. And that refusal is powerful. Your life sends a message without words. It's not too late to choose growth, but it is uncomfortable. And discomfort is the price most people refuse to pay. They lash out because your existence makes denial impossible. Your authenticity demands a question they don't want to answer. What if I had tried? That question is dangerous to someone who built peace on avoidance. So they project, they criticize, they distance, they undermine, anything to escape the reflection. But here's the part that should strengthen you, chosen ones. The fact that your life triggers this reaction means you are aligned. Empty potential doesn't provoke rage. Unlived lives don't attract attention. You are a reminder that potential is real, reachable, and meant to be realized. And that reminder, shining right in front of them, is unbearable for anyone who chose comfort over courage. So don't dim yourself. Don't soften your growth to make others comfortable. Don't question your path because it unsettles people who stopped walking theirs. Your responsibility is not to protect others from the truth your life represents. Your responsibility is to keep going. Because every step you take forward proves one thing beyond debate. Potential ignored becomes regret, and potential honored becomes power. Number 6, you don't applaud effort. That barely exists. You don't clap for scraps or bow to bare minimum effort. Nothing exposes entitlement faster than silence where applause was expected. Chosen ones, this is one of the most underrated reasons you make your haters furious, and it cuts deeper than insults ever could. You refuse to perform gratitude for what should have been standard. You don't exaggerate appreciation for crumbs. You don't applaud effort that barely exists. And you don't participate in the unspoken theater where people expect loyalty, praise, or emotional debt in exchange for doing the absolute minimum. Most people live by a quiet, manipulative agreement. They give just enough attention, just enough support, just enough approval to keep others dependent, and in return, they expect exaggerated gratitude, public validation, and emotional submission. For them, gratitude isn't appreciation, it's leverage. It's how they maintain control, inflate their importance, and rewrite the narrative to make themselves look generous. And then you show up. Chosen ones, you don't play that game. You don't overreact. You don't perform emotional gymnastics. You don't inflate someone's ego for showing basic decency. And that refusal hits harder than confrontation ever could, because it exposes the emptiness of what they've been offering all along. Your standards make them uncomfortable. Your calm response forces an audit they didn't ask for. Suddenly, they're forced to see the gap between what they think they gave and what they actually delivered. You might feel the tension when it happens, the pause, the shift in energy, the confusion on their face when they don't get the reaction they expected. That's because they were counting on a script and you didn't read your lines. They wanted praise where none was earned. They wanted loyalty without consistency. They wanted appreciation without substance. And your silence becomes the loudest answer in the room. This is where their anger comes from, not because you're ungrateful, but because you're aware. You don't validate their attempt to manipulate perception. You don't reward entitlement disguised as generosity. And you don't help them maintain the illusion that bare minimum effort deserves maximum recognition. That illusion collapses the moment you refuse to participate. Chosen ones, understand this clearly. Many people are addicted to being needed, not valued. They don't want mutual respect. They want dependence. They want others to feel indebted so they can feel significant. And when you don't take the bait, when you don't bow, praise, or over-celebrate what should be normal, it feels like rejection to them. Not because you rejected them, but because you rejected the role they assigned you. They expected performance. They expected gratitude on display. They expected you to reinforce their importance publicly. And when it doesn't happen, they feel exposed. Your dignity punctures the fantasy they've been living in. Suddenly, they can't deny that what they offered was small, incomplete, or conditional. Your response, or lack of exaggerated response, highlights the truth without you ever saying a word. This is why they lash out. This is why they label you cold, unappreciative, or difficult. Those labels are defenses. They're attempts to regain control of a narrative that slipped through their fingers. Because if you don't praise them, they're forced to face the possibility that they weren't as generous, supportive, or important as they believed. Chosen ones, this isn't about refusing gratitude. It's about refusing to endorse mediocrity with your energy. You understand that appreciation is meaningful only when effort is meaningful. You understand that value is not determined by expectation, entitlement, or manipulation. It is earned, recognized, and respected. And by living this principle quietly, consistently, and unapologetically, you threaten people who have built their identity on minimum effort and maximum claim. Your standards act like a spotlight. Not a cruel one, but an honest one. And honesty is terrifying to anyone who survives on perception management. They can't buy your loyalty with crumbs. They can't purchase your validation with half measures. They can't control you by pretending that doing the least is doing something special. So when they grow resentful, when they withdraw, when they turn passive-aggressive or dismissive, don't misread it. This is not about you being ungrateful. This is about them being unmasked. You removed the validation they depended on to feel powerful. You exposed the truth that respect cannot be coerced and gratitude cannot be demanded. Chosen ones, hold your standards. Keep your dignity. Let your calm be your boundary. Because the fact that you don't clap for scraps proves something they can't stand to admit. Your value, your self-respect, and your alignment are not for sale, and that realization makes people who live on entitlement absolutely furious. Number 7, your growth exposes what they've refused to face. Your healing makes their neglect impossible to hide. Nothing angers avoidance more than someone who chose to heal. Chosen ones, this is one of the deepest reasons you provoke quiet rage in others, and it has nothing to do with competition, status, or words exchanged. It's about contrast. When you face your pain instead of running from it, when you do the uncomfortable internal work instead of burying it, you become living evidence that healing is a choice. And for people who built their entire identity around avoidance, that evidence feels like exposure. There is a particular kind of anger that lives inside people who refuse to confront their wounds. It's not loud at first. It simmers. It waits. It disguises itself as sarcasm, dismissal, or indifference. And the moment you walk into their space, grounded, self-aware, and emotionally regulated, that anger wakes up. Not because you said anything, but because your presence disrupts the story they've been telling themselves, that time alone heals, that pain fades on its own, that effort isn't necessary. Chosen ones, you didn't just survive hardship. You processed it. You reflected. You learned. You took responsibility for your inner world. And that's what makes them uncomfortable, because they did the opposite. They buried emotions under distraction. They numbed themselves with routine, validation, or blame. They convinced themselves that ignoring pain was the same as overcoming it. Then you appear, calm under pressure, clear in your boundaries, steady in your reactions, and suddenly their stagnation becomes visible. You might ask, why does my emotional stability irritate them so much? Because stability reveals instability. Your composure highlights their volatility. Your self-respect highlights their self-betrayal. Your growth highlights the years they lost, pretending they were fine. You are not reminding them of what you went through. You are reminding them of what they didn't do about it. This is why their reaction often feels unfair or disproportionate. You didn't criticize their coping mechanisms. You didn't lecture them about healing. You simply changed, and change is threatening to anyone who stayed the same to avoid discomfort. Your evolution silently asks a question they don't want to answer. If you could do this, why didn't I? And instead of facing that question honestly, many people choose anger. Notice something important, chosen ones. Your healing is not performative. You don't announce it. You don't demand recognition for it. You don't dramatize your past to gain sympathy. It shows up in how you respond instead of react, in how you walk away instead of explode, in how you choose peace over proving a point. That quiet transformation is devastating to those who rely on appearances because it cannot be imitated or faked. They feel it when conversations don't pull you into chaos anymore. They feel it when their usual emotional hooks stop working. They feel it when you refuse to engage in cycles you've already outgrown. And that loss of access infuriates them. Not because you hurt them, but because you healed yourself beyond their reach. Chosen ones, your inner work exposes the truth that many people avoid for a lifetime. Pain unaddressed doesn't disappear, it calcifies. It hardens into bitterness, resentment, and projection. When you heal, you don't just move forward, you shine a light backward. You illuminate the cost of neglect. And for someone who has invested years into not looking inward, that light feels unbearable. This is why they may minimize your progress, mock your growth, or accuse you of being different as if it's a flaw. Difference is the point. You chose responsibility over denial. You chose growth over familiarity. You chose self-awareness over survival mode. And every time you act with clarity, you show them what accountability looks like in motion. Understand this clearly, chosen ones. Their anger is not proof that you did healing wrong. It's proof that healing works. You are standing where they told themselves they would stand someday, except someday never came because avoidance always delays transformation. Your life makes that delay visible. So when they lash out, when they grow distant, when their tone shifts around you, don't question your path. Interpret it accurately. You are not triggering their wounds. Their wounds were already there. You are triggering their awareness of neglect. And awareness, for someone who avoided it for years, feels like loss of control. Keep going, chosen ones. Your healing is not loud, but it is undeniable. And that undeniable truth is exactly why those who refuse to heal find your presence so hard to tolerate. Number 8. You refuse to be defined, owned, or contained. You refuse to wear their label or live inside their cage. Nothing enrages a controller faster than realizing what they're trying to own has already chosen itself. My dear chosen ones, this is one of the deepest reasons your haters lose composure around you, even when you say nothing at all. You can't be owned, you can't be branded, you can't be claimed. And for people who move through life treating relationships, loyalty, and influence like property, that realization hits like a psychological dead end. They don't know what to do with someone who refuses to belong to their narrative. Most people are conditioned to think in terms of possession. They want to define roles, set expectations, assign labels, and quietly decide who you're allowed to be. They believe closeness equals entitlement, that access equals authority, that history equals ownership. And when you don't play along, when you refuse to let your identity be reduced to their comfort zone, something inside them snaps, because you just broke a rule they never told you about but fully expected you to obey. Chosen ones, you live by internal principles. Your decisions don't need approval. Your direction doesn't need consensus. Your worth doesn't fluctuate based on who recognizes it. That kind of independence isn't loud or dramatic, but it's devastating to anyone who relies on influence, guilt, or emotional leverage to feel powerful. They try to categorize you, label you, box you in, and the moment it doesn't work, frustration turns into hostility. You may notice how often this shows up as subtle behavior. Mockery disguised as jokes, criticism framed as concern, shaming masked as advice. These aren't random reactions, they're symptoms of powerlessness. When someone can't claim you, they try to diminish you. When they can't control your choices, they try to control the story about you. And when that fails, they grow louder, sharper, more desperate. You might ask yourself, why does my independence bother them so much? Because it exposes a truth they don't want to face. Their sense of influence only works on people who doubt themselves. Their authority only exists where fear or dependency is present. You remove both simply by knowing who you are, and suddenly their leverage disappears. Think of it like trying to cage smoke. The tighter they grip, the more obvious it becomes that they were never holding anything solid to begin with. That's what your autonomy does. It turns their attempts at control into public proof of their insecurity. Every effort to own you becomes evidence that they don't own themselves. Chosen ones, your refusal to be claimed isn't rebellion. It's clarity. You're not resisting them. You're just not available for manipulation. You don't trade your authenticity for belonging. You don't shrink your identity to maintain access. And you don't perform loyalty at the cost of self-respect. That level of self-possession is rare, and rarity always attracts resistance. Notice how people who are comfortable in themselves don't try to own others. They don't need to. It's only those who feel hollow inside who reach outward, attempting to claim people, roles, narratives, and power they haven't earned internally. Your presence reminds them of that gap. And that reminder is unbearable. They may accuse you of being distant, difficult, or ungrateful, not because it's true, but because it helps them cope with the fact that you don't revolve around them. You don't bend your values to keep access. You don't alter your identity to maintain approval, and that autonomy disrupts the invisible contracts they assume everyone signs. Chosen ones understand this clearly. When someone gets angry because they can't define you, it's because they plan to. When they react strongly to your independence, it's because they expected compliance. And when they lose composure over your freedom, it's because they depend on possession to feel significant. You don't need to announce your sovereignty. You don't need to defend it. Your life already demonstrates it. The way you move, the way you choose, the way you remain whole without attaching your worth to anyone's expectations. That quiet, unshakable self-determination does more damage to control-driven minds than confrontation ever could. So let them react, let them project, let them struggle with the fact that you exist beyond their reach. You are not here to be owned, branded, or claimed. You are here to live in alignment with who you are, and that freedom, calm, grounded, and unapologetic will always be unbearable to those who survive by trying to possess what was never theirs to begin with. Number 9. You violated the silent rule to stay manageable. You refused to stay manageable. Nothing enrages small thinking more than someone who refuses to shrink. Chosen ones, this is one of the deepest reasons your presence unsettles people, and it's rarely spoken out loud. There is an unspoken agreement operating beneath most social circles, families, workplaces, and friendships. The rules are never written, but everyone feels them. Don't grow too fast. Don't challenge the status quo. Don't become too confident. Don't shine brighter than the environment can tolerate. Above all, don't make others confront what they've chosen to avoid. This silent contract keeps people comfortable, predictable, and superior within their limited frame. And the moment you violate it, everything changes. You didn't sign that agreement. You broke it simply by being real, by choosing growth over approval, by choosing expansion over belonging. You didn't announce it. You didn't rebel loudly. You didn't seek attention. You just refused to stay small. And that refusal is what drives them mad. Most people rely on conformity to feel safe. If everyone around them stays at the same level, makes the same compromises, and accepts the same ceilings, then no one has to question their own choices. Comfort thrives in sameness. But you, chosen one, disrupt that balance. Every step you take toward independence, clarity, and purpose violates the invisible rules they depend on. Your growth becomes a threat, not because it harms them, but because it exposes how much they've settled. You might notice the shift when you start evolving. Support becomes silence, encouragement turns into distance, conversations change tone. Suddenly, your ambition is called arrogance. Your boundaries are labeled selfish. Your confidence is seen as a problem. This isn't coincidence. This is what happens when someone outgrows the space they were expected to occupy. You force others to see the gap between who they are and who they could have been, and that realization is uncomfortable. Ask yourself this: if growth were truly celebrated, why do so many people feel threatened by it? Because your rise doesn't just highlight your progress, it reflects their stagnation. Your discipline contrasts their inconsistency. Your courage challenges their fear. And instead of adjusting, many people choose resentment. It's easier to criticize someone for growing than to confront the reasons you didn't. Chosen ones understand this clearly. They are not angry at your success. They are angry at the truth your success reveals. Your evolution reminds them of the shortcuts they took, the dreams they postponed, and the standards they lowered to feel comfortable. Your refusal to shrink becomes a mirror, and not everyone is brave enough to look at themselves honestly. What makes this even more infuriating for them is that you don't ask for permission. You don't wait for approval. You don't seek validation before you expand. You don't need consensus to move forward. That autonomy shatters the illusion that life is meant to be predictable and controlled. They want everyone to rise only when allowed, to grow only within acceptable limits. You prove that growth doesn't require permission, and that realization destabilizes their sense of order. There's a quote that says, "People don't hate your success. They hate the self-reflection it forces." That's exactly what's happening here. Your life questions theirs without saying a word. Your progress challenges the system they built to feel superior without effort. And because they can't stop you, they try to minimize you. Gossip, dismissal, subtle sabotage. These are not signs of strength. They are symptoms of insecurity. Chosen ones never confuse resistance with wrongdoing. Resistance shows up when something real is happening. If your growth were insignificant, it would be ignored. If your expansion were meaningless, it wouldn't provoke reactions. The fact that it does tells you everything you need to know. You are touching limits they hoped would remain unquestioned. By refusing to stay small, you demonstrate a powerful truth. Life is not about fitting into someone else's comfort zone. It's about alignment. It's about evolution. It's about refusing to betray your potential to make others feel safe. Your unwillingness to compromise your growth exposes how fragile control really is. And for people who depend on control to feel important, that exposure is unbearable. So let them be uncomfortable. Let them react. Let them talk. Your job is not to make yourself manageable. Your job is to move forward honestly, fully, and unapologetically. Chosen ones, the anger you provoke is not a warning, it's confirmation. You didn't break the rules by accident. You broke them because you were never meant to live by them in the first place. And as we come to the end of this message, chosen ones, remember this: the anger you trigger isn't random, and it isn't a curse. It's a signal that you're growing beyond limits others accepted long ago. You are not here to be small, silent, or convenient. If this resonated with you, support the message by liking the video and subscribing to the channel so we can keep delivering content that sharpens your mindset and fuels your rise. Drop 77 in the comments if you recognize yourself in this journey and share this with someone who needs this reminder today.